Millennials.
Lazy,
confused,
always on their phone?
No, you are smart young people. If you're confused about your future, you've come to the right place. We will give you no-nonsense advice and the cold, hard truth.
Nobody said it was going to be easy.
hustle.
I'm not sure I can handle this.
Of course you can. With Millennial Power. The power to control your future.
Today I'm speaking to Cedric Waldburger. Cedric is a Swiss engineer turned entrepreneur and startup investor with interests in over 14 companies worldwide. In the last 2 years, he managed this portfolio of companies while not having a permanent place to live, traveling constantly, doing more than 100 flights a year, having circled the globe more than 11 times, and staying in one location for an average of only 3.7 days, while living out of a carry-on luggage only and only owning 44 physical items, all black in color. In this interview, he will explain why he does what he does and how you can start yourself to declutter your life. He calls himself an essentialist, only owning the things needed to live the life he wants to live. Meet Cedric Waldburger, an essentialist in things, thoughts, and execution. Good morning, Cedric. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Eric. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. I've had a nice few days with you already. You've had some traveling in Indonesia. Yesterday we had a seminar for the Entrepreneurs Organization, and last night you stayed with me. And I'm very fortunate to have a chance to speak to you this morning, and I'm really looking forward to it. So,
me too. A beautiful place. I enjoyed your pool a lot this morning.
Yeah, that's good for a workout. So this interview, I think, after the introduction you've just heard, I think I would like to focus it both on your business side and your lifestyle side, which are both very interesting. And I think, I would like to start with your business side. As I mentioned, you were trained an electrical engineer, but the life you're leading is not the life of a typical engineer. And how is that? And can you tell me a little bit about that?
I studied electrical engineering, then changed to software engineering during my master's. And while it might look now that most of what I do is purely business, I think engineering is, in the end, all about creative problem solving. And I think that's also the number one skill that I've learned at university. It is to deconstruct complex processes and problems into smaller problems and then solve them one by one. Yes. And I think that's, in the end, what entrepreneurship is about. Right.
Yeah, so now in your current life, you have very many roles. Yeah, so you've started companies. In some companies, you're sort of the technical brains. In some companies, you're just the investor. How would you describe yourself now? What kind of person or what kind of role do you have in your business life?
I think what it comes down to is that I'm super passionate about startups in general. This process of going from an idea that we had at the bar last night, meaning something that we just came up with and really has just at the very core is just an idea. Mm-hmm. The process of going from that to 1 million, and 1 million could mean 1 million users, 1 million products shipped, $1 million in revenue. That's what fascinates me, and that's the process that I kind of set out to deconstruct. And I started my first company when I was pretty young, was very fortunate to be able to start iterating and work on that problem in a lot of companies early on. And then the last 3.5 or 4 years I've spent as an investor to kind of parallelize that process and learn from a lot of businesses in parallel. And then beginning of this year, when I felt like the learning curve was not as steep anymore, I decided to become more operational again with a few businesses and try to apply what I think I've learned over the past 3.5 years now in my executive role again.
Right, so you're saying you like to see these companies grow from nothing to 1 million. Is there a point where you lose interest? When it has grown to a certain point where you're not interested anymore in it too much?
I think I'm best at this early stage, the first 24 months. Okay. When it's going from 0 to 1 million. I'm still part of 2 businesses that I've co-founded earlier. Mm-hmm. I still like to watch and be part of that. But I think when it comes to being operational and in an executive role, I think those 24 months, first 24 months are what's most interesting to me.
Yeah. Yeah, and then in those months, what is the role or the contribution that you usually make in these companies?
So right now I'm operational in 3 companies. In one, I'm the founder and CEO and CTO and the whole 9 yards, which is extremely interesting, and I enjoy that, I'd say, the most. And then the other 2 roles, I'm more of a COO kind of role. So I'm there to help them build the processes and help them organize information and systems inside the company.
Okay. And you just mentioned that you started MediaSign, your first company, when you were very young, when you were 14. How did that happen? How did you decide when you were 14 to start a business?
I think the short answer is I didn't.
Okay.
It was a lucky accident, I'd say, looking back. I was very fortunate that school was not very difficult for me. And instead of going out and playing sports, I was in the Boy Scouts, and my leader in the Boy Scouts, Fabian, who's also my best friend and business partner, he set out to create a new website for the Boy Scouts that we were in, and that was basically our first project that we did together. We sat down together on a weekend and started to work on that, and then after that weekend we realized it's kind of fun to work together. So it felt more like a hobby than a company back then. And this was 2002, 2003, so right around the time when everyone needed a website or business card or whatever it was. So we started getting requests from friends and family. We made it a regular thing to always get together on the weekends and build stuff. And then from there, it just kind of took its own dynamic. And I think 3 or 4 years later, we made it an actual company and started to hire people, hired or like rented office space, and it kind of developed from there.
Have you ever had a job that you worked for a company?
At some point when I was like 22, 23, and so this was about 7 years into being an entrepreneur, I felt like maybe there's another side that I haven't seen yet. Maybe there is this corporate world and I might enjoy that as well. So I took a step back from the businesses that I was involved with back then, and I took a job in the corporate world for half a year and built a project for an investment bank in London. And I mean, long story short, I very quickly realized that the startup world is where I feel at home.
Yes.
But I don't regret taking that time to explore the corporate world, because I think it's also important to know what you don't want to do and where you're not good. And for me, I definitely feel very at home in the startup world.
Yeah, maybe make a bit of a jump to a bit more recent history, where you are now part of Tenderloin Ventures. That's a fund that's investing in startups. That's different from starting a company or being the initiator of a startup, right? Could you tell me how you got into this investment business and what you like about it and what Tenderloin Ventures does and what your role is there?
I've worked in several bigger cities around the globe: Hong Kong, New York, London, Paris. And when I came back to Switzerland about 4 years ago, I realized that there's not a lot of entrepreneurs who have made an exit and then invest in companies, so business angels. And I thought there were 2 opportunities. One is to become an investor early on and be able to learn from all these companies early on. And at the same time provide value or bring value to all the startups that we invest in by spending not only money but also all of my time with them and work with them very closely. So for the last 3.5, 4 years since we started Tenderloin Ventures, I've spent probably like 80 to 90% of my time with the portfolio companies that we invested in and help them in a board role or workshops or whatever they needed from me. And I think there's 3 areas that I find most interesting. First is technology. Second is marketing, because MediaSign was a marketing agency and I had some background from there. And then the third area is what I call startup common sense or common knowledge, which are processes and systems that apply to every young business. And that could be something like, how do you efficiently hire? How do you efficiently fundraise? But also, how does the role of a founder change when the company goes from 3 to 10 to 30 people? I've seen in myself and also in my surroundings that you need to be a very different person depending on the stage of your company as the founder. And I just wanted to be a sparring partner for the entrepreneurs that were running these companies and started them.
Yeah, we'll come to your lifestyle a little bit later on, but a part of that is that you're all over the place, all over the world. Your activities are in many places. So what would you say if people say to you, Cedric, it's nice, you have all these activities all over the world, but isn't that spreading yourself way too thin? How is it even possible to give the right amount of attention to all these ventures that you're doing?
The reason behind me reducing the amount of stuff I own and not owning living in an apartment anymore was that I wanted to be very flexible with where I spend my time and be able to use where I'm needed the most or where I can contribute the most value should be the number one factor for where I spend my time. So that's one thing, but then, yes, I agree. Like, I'm spreading myself very thin right now, and I think it's probably my biggest dilemma in my life. I'm just too passionate about all these different opportunities to learn about startups. I wish I could just say I'm going to focus on just one and leave everything else, but it doesn't work for me. It's my number one issue dilemma in my life. It's just that I feel like I'm this sponge that just wants to learn from all these different experiences. And I organize my life around being able to spend the most time with all those companies.
It was one of the things that struck me yesterday when you had the talk, whereby you said that the main reason for having this lifestyle and doing what you're doing is because you feel that this optimizes your learning ability to meet as many people. I found that a very interesting statement. You could say, you do this because you like the adventure, but you're turning it around. Say, well, the core is actually the meeting people and the learning. And I found that very nice. I think that's a very, core value that you have, which is driving your life, I think, at the moment. Yeah?
I'm very passionate about that and use a metric for that. So I track how many inspiring people I meet every month. Which is kind of, it's very close to my heart. Like, meeting people and being able to share experiences and learn from them is very valuable to me.
So these people that you meet, would you say that they stay in your life, or are you okay with just meeting people for the moment?
I think there's two sides to this. One is personal. Your consciousness is not like a balloon that can, if it gets too big, it doesn't work anymore. I try to be very conscious in the moment, and I try to appreciate the moment. I try to appreciate the time I have with someone and not think about, when am I going to see that person the next time? But at the same time, I also live a very fortunate life where, there's all kinds of technology. So if we want to continue our discussion, we can probably just sit on our laptops and talk to each other and even see each other tomorrow or next week. And then also, I travel so much that I feel... The world has become very small. I remember when I first moved to New York about 7 years ago, and I lived there for 7 months. At the end of those 6-7 months, it hit me. I felt like, damn, I've met all these great people, and now I'm moving back to Europe, and I'm never going to see them again. Or maybe I'll see them 2 or 3 times in my life after this. And what I really enjoy about my current lifestyle is that I don't have that feeling anymore. I'm a lot more relaxed. This is my first time into Indonesia, but if I feel like there's a lot of learnings to be made here and I should spend more time here, then I have the ability and freedom to spend a bit more time in Indonesia over the next 6 months. And I'm very thankful for that. Or that's one of the biggest benefits of my lifestyle.
Yes. So, in the short time that I've now met you, I was sort of wondering that, is there a balance that you need to make between being very open and vulnerable to meet new people versus being a little bit protective of yourself? And do you see it that way? Because you're meeting a lot of people and you can get hurt by people or you can get cheated by people. So is that something that you think about, and how do you look at that?
Honestly, I don't think I think about it this way.
Okay.
I try to be very open and put myself into discomforting situations sometimes very consciously, because I think that's where the biggest learnings come from. But also, I think if I've learned one thing over the past few years, it's to become much better communicator, to communicate what I expect and how I am and how I function. And that has helped me a lot to connect with people in a very short time. That's not to say, I think bad things happen and there's bad people in the world. I think it's just part of the equation.
Okay. So if you look at your business life and you would, I don't know how far you're planning ahead, maybe you can talk a little bit about that, but would you have a vision for yourself for what are the things you would want to achieve in 5 years from now? Do you look that far ahead and do you have plans for that?
Honestly, right now I'm in a place where I just enjoy so much what I'm doing that I think I'm happy if I can keep doing what I'm doing right now. I learned so much, and I get joy from like starting my own company again and being operational helped me a lot. Like I'd say like a year ago, I was being an investor is a lot of fun, and you learn a lot, but it's not the same as being in the driver's seat. So starting my own business was definitely a changing moment beginning of this year. And right now we're building the team in this company called Centask. I tell people, so we only have one weekly call where we talk to each other. And I feel like I have a bit of a crush on my team because I'm always looking forward to that call. Like I'm just so excited to talk to my guys every week. So right now I'm perfectly happy, and there's no like 5-year plan of how I want to change my life or what I want to get to. Obviously, I think we want to grow a bit. I want to grow the team. I want to grow sales. Hopefully, some of the investments will do well. But I'm in a very happy place right now. So hopefully, I can just continue doing what I'm doing right now.
Yeah, and you also yesterday you shared something about you have this 90-day cycle for many things in your life, but also for reviewing what you want to do over the next 90 days. Why is that 90-day period so important?
So I think with both on the business side and the lifestyle side of someone's life, it's always easy to get too focused on the moment and just keep walking down a path because that's what you've always done. So I think it's healthy to take a step back every now and then and ask ourselves, what do we do with our lives? A lot of people have New Year's resolutions.
Yes.
What I've seen for myself and also for some people in my circles is that 1 year is typically, we tend to overestimate what we can do in 1 week, and we tend to underestimate what we can do in a year. So it's kind of hard to, for me at least, it's hard to make New Year's resolution that I then follow for the full year. For myself, I've seen that 90 days is kind of like the sweet spot for how I should do goal setting. So 90 days gives me enough time to really change and go after something that I want to go after. But it's not too long that I can't see what's going to happen within those 90 days.
Yeah, I can understand that. Maybe we come back to some of the business things, but let's make a switch first to something that is you can find on the internet about you. And in the introduction, I've explained, a lot of this about this. But in short, what it comes down to now is that currently you own 44 items. People can actually find those online. You keep a list on cedricwaldburger.ch at 64 things. It's called 64 things, but it's at the moment 44, and you travel around in a carry-on. And this is not a myth. I've seen it. I've weighed the bag, so it's really true. Can you tell us something about that choice? And it was part of your constant 90-day life evaluation, as you have explained. But that's a choice that not many people make. And why do you do that?
So I think even as a kid, I've never really liked owning and buying stuff. Just the process of that was never something that gave me joy. And then I'm very numbers driven. The way my head works is very math, physics based, and I like numbers a lot. So I think just as an experiment, about 4 or 5 years ago, I started to index everything that I own. And I went around my apartment and I created a spreadsheet with everything that I own. And I saw that the number was pretty big. It was probably like 400 or 500 items. And it felt like I was already living a minimalistic lifestyle back then, but I realized there's so much stuff that I don't really need. And as soon as I had a number, I started to track like what I owned, and then you also start to optimize for it. And so it just became a bit of a game at the beginning, and I reduced a lot of stuff. I gave away certain items, but I also like the process of consolidating. Like the more meaning I can give to one single thing, I think that's an elegant process of using one thing for multiple purposes. So I've started to reduce the number of items I've had over the past few years. At the same time, I started to become an investor and travel a lot between first Zurich and Berlin, and then also to the States. And I realized that I started traveling more and more. And sometimes I would go back to Zurich just to be with my flat or just to be in my apartment because I was paying for this apartment and there was stuff. And at some point I realized that doesn't make any sense. Like, why would I go back to Zurich just to spend time with my apartment if I knew that it would have been better if I spent time in Berlin with one of those companies that I could give value to? And So sometime last year, I decided to give up on my apartment, and then obviously you don't want to travel with a full-size bag and wait at the baggage claim 100. So I'm on about 100 flights per year. So you don't want to spend 100 times waiting for your bag. So everything I owned had to fit into a carry-on at that point. And that naturally just restricted me to a certain amount of things. And I packed the things that I felt are most universal or allow me to do the most, allow me to go through most experiences. Mm-hmm. And that's how it came down to the 64 items. And I keep reducing and consolidating. So now I'm at about 44 items right now.
Yeah, that's right. So this does get you attention, I can imagine, right? It's always, it's a conversation opener for many people. So is that on design? So does it open doors for you? And is that also why you do it?
So the 64 items is very catchy. And you're right. It's an icebreaker. It opens the door many times for a good cocktail conversation.
Yeah.
But then I think there's an underlying value, which is like only owning stuff that has purpose in your life, which I think is something that all of us value, or a lot of us value. Just this notion of essentialism and owning only the stuff that provides essential value in our life. So that sparked a lot of very interesting conversations.
Yeah. And the one thing that I've heard you talk about is that you have a very interesting point about how young people nowadays look different at possessions, in your opinion, than the previous generation, or maybe my generation and before. Could you say something about that?
Yeah. What I see in my parents' generation, and of course this is a generalization, but I feel that there's certain status symbols which are generally looked upon as something that's worth achieving. Let's say having a nice car, having a nice house, having maybe multiple cars, multiple houses, jewelry. And when I look at my generation, I feel there's a shift from things to experiences. Mm-hmm. So I think what the Ferrari was for the previous generation, in my generation, it's owning a passport that's full of stamps and having lots and lots of good stories to tell and experiences that you've shared with each other. I think among all the bad trends we see in the world, I think that's a very positive trend.
Yeah, that people get less materialistic, I think, and more valuing more the human interaction, or the human, the human touch of life, the value of humans in your life. And there's also, you also spoke to me about the fact that the things you own don't only take up the energy it takes to make them or to buy them, but there's more to that in your life, right? How does that work? How do you see that? So having more things has more impact than only owning them and buying them.
I think everything you own in some way also needs to be maintained, whether it's a car, a house, or even if it's like 10 different pairs of shoes. You need to consciously decide what you're going to wear. You need to clean them. And I think that's one aspect. Like, you need to take care of your things as well. And if you have too much, you might end up spending more time on your things than the things providing value to you. And the other thing is I've set out and I try to remove I try to not have any sentimental or emotional connection to the things I own. So that if my stuff gets stolen or it gets in a fire and it all breaks or whatever, I don't want to be sad about that. I want to be sad if I lose some person in my life, but I don't want to be sad about losing a thing. And I think now I'm at the point where everything is purely functional. Everything that I've owned that had emotional value, I digitalized and I keep online, which also has the benefit that I can access it at all times, whether I'm in the US or here in Indonesia or in Switzerland.
Right, yeah. So, last year I've traveled for 6 months, and we set ourselves a quota of each family member, and it's the 5 of us, my wife, my 3 kids. They had half a suitcase of stuff that they could bring. And we were traveling for 6 months with each half a suitcase, and we were shocked by the fact that it was actually way too much. So just by doing that, I realized, actually, you're right. You can do with a lot of less things in your life and a lot of less things in traveling. So, and I think, like me, there's probably many people that think, like, this is a great idea. I don't know if 44 is the number, but if I look around this room and if I look around my house, I think, I can get rid of things. So people that want to start this journey and that would want to start in decluttering some of the things in their life, how would you tell them to do that?
So one process that helped me a lot to get from the 400 plus items that I've had down to the 44 that I have now is to, for me, it was this 90-day rhythm. So every 90 days I would look at my spreadsheet, or I would walk around my apartment, and I would ask myself, have I used a certain item within the last 90 days, or am I going to use it within the next 90 days? So in total, I cover a span of 180 days, which is half a year. And my assumption was that in half a year, I would go through all kinds of experiences: casual, formal, warm weather, holidays, cold weather. And so if I don't think I'm going to use that item within the span of half a year, I just put it in a bag and I put it in the corner. And then if after another 90 days I would come back and I had not removed the item from that bag, I gave it away. And that helped me a lot to focus on what I really need in my life and what was just sitting there in my closet and on my desk.
And then, I think the good steps are because for people to throw things away or give things away as a first step to decluttering might be quite challenging. And in your process, basically, you put it away first. Yeah, you put it away. If you don't touch it, then it's very clear that you actually don't really need it. I think that's a sort of a safe way to get started.
Yeah, it's easy to just put it in a bag because you still have it in your home. Like if you suddenly realize you need it, you can always go back. But for me, it never happened that I went back to that bag and picked something from it.
I mean, you now live a life, and you call it distributed living, right? You have no own home to go back to by choice, but doing this living all over the place, have you had places where you were and you think, wow, this attracts me? Is there an appeal to maybe at some point stay longer in a certain place in the world? And from your current travels, would you have an idea where that would be, if at all?
So to answer your first question, I don't think I'll sustain that lifestyle for the next, I don't know how many years. I'm not trying to prove a point, but I think at some point it's just natural to settle down again when you want to have a family, and that will probably happen. I'm trying to make the most out of my freedom while I have it. And now, where would I stay if let's say I couldn't travel for the next 6 months? I would stay in Hong Kong. I used to live there and study there about 5 or 6 years ago, and the city is amazing. Just the density of experiences you can get in that city, to me, is amazing. You have everything from Western culture to Eastern culture. You have the 24/7 city life on Hong Kong Island, but you also have beaches and beautiful hikes on the Kowloon side. In one and the same building, you can have amazing street food, mall restaurants, and top-notch high-end restaurants at the top. Just the density of experiences you can get in that place is really speaks a lot to me.
Yeah, I can imagine that. And in the way you live your life and the busyness you have created, not only by the business activities that you do, but then combined with the fact that you're on the road all the time, how do you find a way to relax and to recharge and to sort of reset your brain?
One thing is that I've built a lot of systems and rituals for all the disturbance I think you could have in that life. Let's say airport security. I go through it about 100 times per year. I listen to a lot of audiobooks and podcasts, and so my head is in a completely different place than my body usually when I go through security. It's like reading a book on the beach. Unfortunately, my body is going through security, but in my head I'm just sucking up all that information. So that's one thing. Second is, I actually get very calm on airplanes most of the time. I use noise-canceling headphones, and I like that moment of being disconnected so that I can think about long-term stuff. I can write, I can read, I can get emails done without getting answers right away. So I think what it comes down to is just building systems and rituals for those kinds of situations that might be stressful. And then one thing that also helped me is to have a daily routine that I can follow wherever I am. So whether I'm in Indonesia, in Switzerland, or in Zurich, or in the US, I have a set of rituals that I follow. So I only take cold showers every day, in the morning, in the evening. I work out twice a day, short bodyweight exercises, so I'm not reliant on a gym. And that has helped me a lot to bring some routine to what might look as a very chaotic life from the outside.
Right, yeah. I have one more question about the business side, which is you are very interested in many things. And clearly you're a very open personality, so you get a lot of opportunity, you got a lot of people coming to you. So what do you use to decide whether or not you're going to spend your money maybe, but especially your time on a project? What is the criteria for you to step into something new?
I'd say there's a difference between the businesses where I'm operational and the businesses that I've invested in. For the investments, there's two clear theses. One is that Amazon will not enter the Swiss market, hopefully, for the next few years.
Right.
And so there's a big opportunity for high-margin niche markets in Switzerland. So that's part of my investments. And the other investments are what I call digital models, or models that scale really well, meaning that they are using technology to and automation, AI, to serve another 1,000 to 10,000 users without adding any staff on the company side. I think that's very elegant. Now, the companies that I get involved with personally or in an operational role, they either need to solve a very big problem of myself, or I have a sweet spot for like cutting edge technology. Cryptocurrencies or just blockchain-based technology startups right now are very close to my heart. Computer vision. I like to sink my teeth into all kinds of new technologies and the applications of those technologies into the real world.
Okay. And from everything that you're currently working on, does one stand out that excites you the most at the moment? And is it like that? Is it when you have these many businesses? Is there always one that is at the time like your favorite?
I think about it a bit differently. I think what I'm most passionate about is like finding and deconstructing this process in all those different businesses and testing and experimenting with new systems and rituals in all these different companies. I'd say Zendesk is a bit different just because I'm the founder and CTO. It's my baby. I'm the only founder as well so far. So that has a bit of a special role because I manage the whole company culture and the team. But other than that, I'm very, I'd say all of them are equally valuable to me in terms of learning experiences that they offer me.
Okay. You're very young. Your life is only 28 years old, but still you've had so much experience in that 28 years. If you now would go back to the time that you started your first business when you were 14, right? Would you tell your 14-year-old self certain things to do differently based on how you've lived this last 14 years?
I'm really happy with where I am, but that said, I would probably be a bit more bold early on.
Even more bolder.
What I mean by that is that I think like that step with like giving up my apartment just to be there for my businesses and being more free. It took me a long time to realize that that's the right thing to do. Which I guess is fine. It's always like things are always a process, right? But just like realizing that you can always experiment. Like it's always, as long as you set the guidelines correctly, you can always experiment and go for it. And the other thing that I would probably tell myself is to start traveling earlier. Like the first time I've moved away from Switzerland was when I was 21 for an extended period of time and worked somewhere else. And that has expanded my horizon by at least tenfold. And so that was an extremely valuable lesson. So yeah. I think those are the two things that I would tell myself.
I hope many people take that to heart. I think I started traveling way too late in my life as well. And I think it opens up perspective, especially when you really start to live somewhere and integrate in a society or absorb society the way you do it by just being there in an intensive way. And I think it shows you how big the world is and how diverse and how beautiful and how many things there are to see and to learn. And I have that same feeling. I think traveling, being elsewhere, I've lived in Indonesia for 20 years I've traveled a lot too, but I think just being here has changed me as a person, and I think for the better for the most part. So that's cool. I like that view. A practical thing and then one closing question. So I hope that a lot of people reach out to you and shout out to you and say, hey, I like this story. How would you like them to get in touch with you?
So they can reach me on my website, cedricwaldburger.com. There's also links to my Twitter, my Facebook, my email there, my LinkedIn. So any of those channels are equally useful. So they can just reach out, and I hope to get the conversation started. I'm always very, very passionate about getting connected with people from all over the world, especially if they're interested in that kind of lifestyle or interested in startups as well. And I hope we can continue the discussion there.
My closing question that I ask everybody is, I would like to know from you, what does the word freedom mean to you?
Freedom, for me, freedom is a process. It means that I can be very honest with myself and live life the way I think it's most valuable, both to myself, but also most valuable to the people and groups that surround me. It means being very conscious to me and consciously choosing where you need to be free and where you can make a compromise and where you want to be invested and committed and focused. If I apply that to my current lifestyle, I think freedom for me means that I'm very free to be wherever I want to be and spend time with whatever project I want to spend time with. It also means that I'm not free in a lot of ways, meaning I spend a lot of time away from the people I love and value a lot. And I also spend a lot of time working on maybe tough problems that are not always that do not always look nice immediately. Sometimes it takes a bit of hindsight to realize that it was worth spending time on those problems.
Beautiful. Cedric, thank you so much for the interview. It was an honor to have you, to host you. I hope to stay in touch with you for a long time.
Definitely. Thank you very much for having me.
You're welcome.
Millennial Power. The power to control your future.